discoveries suggest that Ethiopia is a place where the earliest human ancestors were found. In this same country, millions have suffered and are still suffering as a result of political and social upheavals. By the year 1991, after a long-time struggle, Ethiopians deposed the former president, Mengistu Haile Mariam, and a pro-independence insurgents controlled Eritrea, and a coalition of insurgents, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, dominated by Tigrayans, took control in Addis Ababa. The EPRDF then renamed itself Transitional Government of Ethiopia, TGE, and pledged a stable and democratic political system. In May and June, following the December 1994 adoption of a new constitution, the TGE held national and regional elections, which were boycotted by all major political parties, as they associated the TGE with ethnic cleansing politics that divided the country along ethnic lines. In August the same year, the TGE established the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, FDRE, and transformed itself into a FDRE government. The government has claimed that it has devolved power to local authority and devised procedures for constitutionally guaranteed rights. However, in the words of Mr. Johnston, the former U.S. chairman of a congressional subcommittee for Africa, there have not been any reforms at all in human rights and freedom of the press. The government and its departments use the former Mengistu's regime as a benchmark to bring change and determine human rights progress. The government has accepted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that reads, "Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted him by the Constitution or by law." But is the government really sticking to its pledges and promises regarding human rights in Ethiopia? Recently, the chairman of Ethiopian Human Rights Council, Professor Mesfin Wolde Mariam, gave press conferences to different audiences on the question of human rights. The following are some of the many examples of the cases and atrocities committed by the
Shoye is an 18-year-old girl, still in high school. Her father is detained, allegedly for helping that same rebel in that region. Shoye was detained and tortured in the same way to testify against her father, to tell the police that her father in fact helped that rebel in the region. And when she came, she was even in more terrible shape. They could keep her for about a month, therapy, medical treatment, and she could use her fingers a little bit, but still, as the doctors told us, it will take quite a long time before the brain and these hands will start to communicate. The hand has been strangulated here, so it will take a long time. Now, we have names. We haven't seen them yet. We have names of 10 more women who have suffered the same type of torture, and several men. And in fact, we suggested in the report that there must be some sick person there in that place. We suggested to the regime that they must do something about it. They haven't done anything yet. This guilt by association is normal in Ethiopia. If somebody is suspected of a certain crime, you are a wife, you are certain to get it. You are a son, you are a friend. A friend. You are certain to be maltreated. Wives who have had plenty of cases. We have had a case in Northern Shore of a woman, broken hands, both hands almost incapacitated by electric wire, tied tightly by electric wire, simply because they believed her husband had gone to the woods to oppose them, and because they believed that she knew where he was, and they wanted to extract information from her. Now, this is the a lot of cases could be cited. The regime in Ethiopia today does not have God, does not have conscience, does not have law, does not have the slightest respect for public opinion. Now, these are very clear characteristics of a repressive regime. The West supports fully this dictatorship, and indirectly the terror perpetrated against the Ethiopians.
The artist Tamine Bayene is a well-known drummer and stage entertainer popular among all Ethiopians. He is loved and supported by the people for his excellent stage presentations and performances, but he has been banned since 1991 from performing at any public gathering by the Ethiopian government. Consequently, he is deprived of his beloved profession. At the end of May 1996, Tamine Bayene went to Addis Ababa Stadium as a football fan, supporting the Ethiopian national team that was to play in the East and Middle African football tournament. During the game, he and a number of other people were taken to a hidden security detention center, a so-called crime prevention center by the government, for alleged involvement in political violence. They were subject to brutal mental and physical torture by the security police at this center. An audience of Ethiopians had the opportunity to attend a meeting addressed by artist Tamine Bayene on the 6th of July 1996 in London. The following are some of the appalling stories he told journalists and the audience at the meeting.
በኢህአዴግ ፕሮግራም መሰረት የቀድሞ መንግስት ባለስልጣኖች የዘር ማጥፋት ወንጀል ፈጽመዋል ይላል። ይህንንም በቴሌቪዥን አቅርቦ ፍርድ ቤት ከነክራባታቸው ምግብ ልብስ እየገባላቸው በአግባቡ ፍርድ ቤት እየቀረቡ ነው። ጀግናው የሚሉትን አህየሎ የሚባለው ሰው እየገደለው ሰው ፍርድ ቤት ውስጥ በአግባቡ ቀርቦ ምግብ ምን ቀርቦለት ይከራከራል።
The charge against the former government officials is that they have committed crime against humanity. They appear in court well dressed and in a reasonable health, and the government tell the world that these people are getting fair treatment because, they say, the government provides them with the necessary things they need in prison. The alleged killer of Hailo, the former military chief of staff, enjoys the same rights as others. The question I ask is then, why some of us at least deprived of such rights for our alleged crimes? Is it because we are not known to the world? I myself was taken away from the Addis Ababa Stadium for doing nothing other than waving the Ethiopian national flag to cheer up the national team. Is this a serious criminal offense? If it is, against whom is the crime committed? If it is an offense, should you be taken to a detention center where you are denied what they call a fair trial? Those of us detained have not killed anyone nor attempted to overthrow the government. In the absence of a court warrant or order, we were taken to a detention center where there was no provision whatsoever made for food and clothing. We were not taken to a police station for custody. I have no words to explain the beastly torture we were subjected to. Imagine a person being beaten continuously for 3 hours on just their bare body in extremely cold weather.
ያን ነገር ህይወት ፍጻሜ ያረሳው የሰው ልጅ እንደ በሬ እየተገረፈ መሬት ጋር እኔ በጣም ዘራፊያችንን አዘንኩ እንደ ሰው አለማሰቡ እንደ ከፍ ቆጥሯል በሬ ሲያርዱ እንደሚሉት እንደሱ ያረጋ ይቀርፋል.
That is what it means to fall in the hands of the EPRDF security police. On our first day of detention, characterized by beatings and whippings, we lost all the physical and mental sensation, sleeping on a very cold cement floor with no clothes on our body. At 4:45 after midnight, the security officers came into the small prison house and stepped on our chests in turn to check the extent of our readiness for the next round of beatings. Early in the morning, we were told to come out of the very cold and compact cell for the next round of beatings. We were ordered to lie on a waterlogged ground after all-night heavy rains. We were then ordered to roll back and forth along a sandy ground. This was followed by the beatings. This day, my beater was a new officer and had all the energy to barbarously beat me. We were then told to lift up a 100-pound metal weight and keep it held up for long hours and even drag it on the ground like the oxen do during farming. If any one of us failed in this, we received the necessary punishment, whipping. The beaters had not the slightest sympathy towards anyone and were extremely barbarous. The memory of this is something I probably will forget only when I die. The most appalling thing is that the torturers delight in the suffering they inflict. When the suffering becomes intolerable, your body expresses its protest by throwing out the food that has been eaten. Those of us who vomited received our punishment for doing so. The security forces think it is only bullets that kill people. You cannot communicate with the security forces through the medium of human language by using the official language, Amharic. At times, we begged for mercy and humanitarian gesture in the name of God and Jesus Christ. This rather increased the beatings on us. We finally pleaded for them to kill us rather than subject us to such sufferings. All that they did for us was ridicule our strong request. Among us, there were 2 mentally ill people detained. As the sufferings exceeded the limit they could sustain, one of them asked the security forces to kill him, finish him off, and that, if they did not do it, he would do it himself. The security forces laughed at this and told him to go ahead, as it would be fun to watch. The mentally ill detainee ran on towards the wall and pulled the electric wires off the wall to try and kill himself. We held him back and saved his life. Another detainee who suffers from tuberculosis illness requested if they could take him to a medical doctor that will give him a drug injection for his treatment. They told him to ask the other detainee with the title of a doctor, even without them knowing whether he is a medical doctor or a PhD holder in another field. As the security forces denied what the person has requested, he again pleaded to them to separate him from the rest so that the disease won't be communicated to the other detainees. They did not bother about that at all, and this was also normal for them. We were then taken outside of the detention small house and stood up in the sun. I asked them if they would allow me to sit down on the ground. When they asked me why I wanted to sit down on the ground, I told them that I was exhausted. They were sarcastic and asked me why my body was not as strong as my tongue. They also asked me why I had made personal attacks on Tamara Laine, the previous Prime Minister, and now a Defense Minister. I told them that I did not do any personal harm to them, and to the Prime Minister at the time 3 years ago. I also said that we were given freedom of speech, and hence I simply had practiced my fundamental rights and no more than that. The officer said that I shouldn't be treated as human being. When I saw him becoming more aggressive, I simply kept quiet, knowing that what would follow. We then were told to go into the detention house. After the second day of all our sufferings, we desperately needed food. Until 10 a.m., we were given no food to eat. The business of being beaten continued as usual. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a chief security officer arrived with an Opel car. We hoped that we would be released, but all that happened was we were given a piece of bread thrown at us from a plastic bag. Receiving this piece of bread was unforgettable, as it was to save our lives and give us strength for the next round of beating. However, when we bit the bread with our teeth and held it in our mouth as we could not swallow it, there was no saliva, no strength left at all. Those of us who were not able to swallow the bread had to be whipped for an hour for not making it. So everyone tried to pretend that they were eating. The time for the meal was then finished and the security chief had left. I said to the detainees in the cell, "Look friends, there is no Red Cross Society and no Amnesty International. It's only God can save us from this ruthless place, so let's pray." We prayed for about half an hour. Fortunately, they never heard our prayers, otherwise severe punishment would have followed.
እግዚአብሔር ከዚህ ፈተና አውጣን ብለ ተበታት ያው ሰዓት ደረሰ ይግርፋት እንደገና በሁለት መስመር ወጣን ዛሬ ደግሞ ሌላ
The time for the beating came again. We were told to come out of the house in 2 lines. We had a new beating officer. He called me by name and ordered me to come out first. He did not know who I was but knew my name as he was fulfilling instructions from his superiors. After this next round of torture and suffering was over, our bodies were stiff and paralyzed. We were almost dead. In the evening, at about 10 o'clock, another chief security officer arrived. We came out of the house and he started talking about what he called reason political activity in the stadium. He first ordered for the release of the people detained before us. These were about 15. The rest of us were warned that our names, house numbers, and all personal details were registered. Any attempt to tell the stories of our detention to our families or friends, or involve ourselves in any future political activity would be suicidal.
ሽማግሌዎች ሳይቀሩ ተንበረከኩ በዚያ አጋጣሚ አንድ 55 ዓመት ሰውዬ ፖሊሱ ሲናገራቸው ሲመልሱ አግሬት በጣም በመናደዱ የግራቸውን ሲምባሩ ታያዘው ብላሽነታቸው
We had to kneel down and admit that we're guilty. We're forced to make false confessions, had to agree to accept not to appear in public places. An old man about 15 years old, and who found it difficult to accept the constructed false stories, was hit on the leg by the chief officer. His leg broke, and while he was limping, he was told to do physical exercise with only one leg. The old man's child, 5 years old, detained with his father, watched his father being brutally punished, both hands on his cheeks. I was told to stand up in front of the rest, the analogy of Red Terror during the Derg time, and the security chief made an hour-long speech, 45 minutes of which was about myself. I was forced to confess that I have been playing at this, democracy, the blood of the TPLF fighters, and so on for 5 years.
ለአንድ ሰዓት ንግግር አደረገ። ከዚህ ውስጥ 45 ደቂቃው በሙሉ ስለኔ ነበር። ቆሜ በዛኛው ፊት እንድታይ አለኝ። ቆም ራሴን ይሄ አሁን በአሁኑ ሰዓት እነሱ እንደሚያደርጉት ይሄ ቀይ ሽብር ተዋና የሚባሉ አሉ። ብዙ ፊት ቆመው እንዲሰድባቸው የሚደረጉ ራሴን እንደዛ ነበር ያየው። የስድቡ ቀፋፊነት እና በኢትዮጵያ ሰላምና ዲሞክራሲ ላይ ለ5 ዓመት ያለማቋረጥ እንቅፋት በመሆን በወያኔ ሓርነት ትግራይ
The chief officer said that I was stupid and a vagabond, hooligan and slanderer.
ወራዳ በቃ የስድብ አይነት ባለጌ ቤት ስድብ ብዙ ነው። የሚችለውን ያህል ተገበኝ እኔ ከዛሽ ቦታ መውጣትን ብቻ ስለምመኝ እየነሳው ተቀበልኩ።
I accepted all he said with a man just to come out of this terrible torture. The chief officer said that I escaped further punishment because I was detained with people who had committed less crime. When I heard that, I could not believe it. We were released from being punished before we knew what the convictions were. It's only now, after my release, that I realized the extent of the injury that has been inflicted upon me. I was scared to go to the local hospital for treatment, as there has been an incident which was shown on TV in which an artist was deliberately killed during his treatment in hospital. I decided to stay in bed at home and call a local traditional therapist whose name I do not want to mention, as it is very dangerous for the life of this person who is still in Ethiopia. I stayed at home and recovered from my mental and physical injury. I went to hospital here in this country, and I was told that my ribs were damaged and my spine affected and dislocated.
ወጣዋላ የሆስፒታልና የሜዲካል ፊዚዮቴራፒ ምናምን መውሰድ ነበረብኝ። ሆስፒታል እንዳለ ተፈራው። ከዚህ በፊት አንድ የሚጠረጠር እንደዚህ አንድ አርቲስት ሞቶ እንደዛሬ ሆስፒታል ገባ። በቴሌቪዥን አላስፈላጊ አድርገው አሳዩት። ማለት አንድ ሰው ማንኛውም ሰው ታሞ ይገባል፣ በቴሌቪዥን ከታየ በኋላ ጧት ሞታል። ስለዚህ እንደዛ አይነት አጋጣሚ ሊፈጠር ስለሚችል የትኛውን ሆስፒታል አምኜ መግባት አለብኝ እና ቤቴ ሆኜ አንድ ወጌሻ እየተመላለሰ ያከመኝ ነበር። ስሙን ግን በተቻለኝ እንድጠብቅ ነግሮኛል። ምክንያቱም እኔን ያከመም ወንጀለኛ ነው። አንድ ሳምንት ያህል እንግዲህ በዚህ መልኩ አገግም የመጨረሻ ማስጠንቀቂያ ተሰጥቶኛል። በየትኛውም መድረክ በየትኛውም አካባቢ እንግዲህ በኋላ
In Ethiopia, at this very time, there are thousands of people who are subjected to the worst ruthless human rights abuses. In general, there are 2 categories of citizens in Ethiopia. The first category citizens are the privileged members of the TPLF and EPLF, the majority of Tigrayans and Eritreans. These are people who are above the law and could do anything they want. They are the government and they do all sorts of favors for the followers of their political line, but eliminate and execute all those whom they consider are their opponents. The second category are the rest of the people who have no constitutional or legal protection at all. Consequently, these people are subjected to all kinds of human suffering. The security forces have been engaged in mercilessly torturing people under false pretexts and baseless suspicions to force them to make false confessions, who were subjected to cruel and inhuman degrading treatment and punishment, who were then compelled to testify against ourselves and confess to being guilty. This is what democracy means under the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front's rule in Ethiopia today. This is what democracy means under the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front's rule in Ethiopia today. This story cannot be disclosed to anyone, as my life and the lives of our parents and relatives still in Ethiopia would be in danger. I know you cannot do anything to help those victims of EPRDF's terror on the innocent population. It is just to give you a picture of what is happening in Ethiopia.